Yeah. All right.
Here we are with Matthew Craig, who is technically the E-Lab specialist here at Red Bank High School in the Volkswagen E-Lab. And we're just excited to talk to you today because we have our America 250 Design Challenge, which is what we're creating this video on here, so that we can connect teachers to other teachers who are already doing similar projects and that you have done it. We want to give a little bit of, I don't know, what do you say, comfort, or at least connect to another teacher that has done this in a way that is really, really cool. So we're here, obviously, in your E-Lab.
Yes.
Can you talk about what you've done with students already when it comes to puppetry? Because this is going to be this is the design challenge, right? We're creating finger puppets or maybe some larger puppets. Going to home in on our finger puppets. You will be getting those as samples to take a look at. But can you kind of talk a little bit about that process of walking students through how to create the puppets, and I think really lean into, those situations where, maybe teachers come to you, they want to do this project, they have no idea where to start, they don't know what materials to go with, they might feel a touch overwhelmed.
Sure.
Can you lean into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's really easy to get overwhelmed, and it's also really easy to get overcomplicated, right? So the thing that we always want to do is we want to make it as simple as possible. A lot of times people think, when they think about a puppet, they think about a Muppet, right? Because everybody knows about the Muppet Show, or they grew up with Sesame Street and stuff like that. And those are great, It makes it really easy to talk, with a mouth, right? Yeah. That's the mouth part of the puppet, is a Muppet. But you can also do just puppets like stick puppets, which are pretty cool. I remember this was some years ago, we were doing a piece where we were talking about, it was the Mexican cessation and, the War of, well, I can't remember that. You would know that better than I would.
1848? Are we talking about this?
Yes. So, and so how Mexico ceded some land to the United States, and so, how do you personify Mexico? And that was really the question that the students came up with. And it was well, one way we could do is we could have just an outline of what Mexico looked like at that time, and just have that on a stick, and all of a sudden now you've got Mexico as a puppet, right? So it can be very, very simple. It could be a silhouette puppet. You think about things that people put out on their porches and things like that for different holidays that are really just two-dimensional. It can be a two-dimensional puppet, right? It doesn't have to be overwrought. It doesn't have to look exactly like the person. So my suggestion would just, at first, keep it very, very simple.
And maybe go through some of those different iterations that we're talking about. This is a design challenge. We're going to be having checkpoints through here. So maybe that first one is exceptionally simple. And then students can then take a look at that, see how they can, make some adjustments, changes. That's their prototype, and then build off of that as they go along. What we're going to be making, obviously, so our student teams who are competing this are going to be making finger puppets on Medal of Honor or Space Medal of Honor recipients. And as you know, the Medal of Honor is the highest decoration our nation gives for those serving in the military. And, it definitely, there's a lot of respect that comes with that, right? And so when we're talking about puppets, we're creating a visual of these people, right? These ordinary people who did extraordinary things. But there's still a level of respect that we have to bring to that. And I think, having gone through the Fab Lab here that the Public Education Foundation and Volkswagen puts together, we created puppets one year, and I remember you talking to us about the importance of still showing respect to these individuals. And how do you do that with students? How do you communicate that to students? Because these teachers who are going to be the sponsors of these student groups, obviously they're going to have to be involved with this. How do you bring that into the conversation? I just think it's fun. We're in a school.
Right?
It's there. This is a real deal. We're actually in a real school. How do you walk students through ensuring that they are respectful in what they are creating? Because they're creating puppets about real historical figures, especially these who have received our nation's highest award, Medal of Honor recipients, or Space Medal of Honor recipients. There's a level of respect, high level of respect that comes with this, and any historical figure, but obviously these in these categories as well. How do you communicate that to students, and how do you help steer them in a direction to where it's still fun, because we want this to be a fun challenge, but also where it is respectful in its own way?
Right. Yeah, I think you can kind of approach it like a caricature in a lot of ways. Of course, sometimes caricatures, it kind of depends on how it's going to land, right? And I think that's kind of the iterative part of that. So you may start out with a sketch, drawings about what are some of the things that really stand out about the look of this particular person, right? And I always go to Project Puppet, I think is the name. There's projectpuppet.com, and they have some templates, and they basically break humans down into three basic kind of archetypes. And you got like your melon head that are kind of elongated
Like
heads.
the Hey Arnolds of the world?
Yes, right. You've got the pinheads that are a little bit taller head, right? Maybe a high forehead. And then you've got like your like your sock puppet type person, right? So if you kind of break people down into those categories, then it kind of gives you something to go off of. A lot of times we also will take some graphic design software and posterize those, just like you think about the Shepard Fairey poster, the Obama Hope poster, right? And break those down into the different components. You can also, it kind of gives you like a ready-made caricature, sort of, because it defines the facial features of that person. And then the other thing is, like, and many teachers look at portraits as a way into kind of understanding the history, right? So you might do a portrait study of this person, right? So what are the things that this person is wearing that help portray who they are and what they're about, right? Do they have medals on their chest? What are they wearing? Are they wearing a suit coat or top hat or things that are very specific to that person, right? Where is their gaze, right? What are they looking at, and how do they look? Are they a very fierce looking person? Are they like we all just kind of have a different ways about us, right? Things that strike us. And then the other thing oftentimes is like, what are people holding, right? I think I would imagine that in a Medal of Honor puppet, it would be very easy to like for students to tend toward kind of the militaristic pieces of it, like that they should be holding guns. And I quite clearly that is important, right? And also, what sorts of things might they be holding that would be important to that person also? Right? Like I always think back to Sergeant York and the movie there, and his the story that they tell in that. And this is really an old movie, but where he goes to the turkey shoot, and that's like kind of where he develops his skill as an expert marksman, right? So like I don't know. Maybe he's a turkey hunter. I don't know.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up of what they may be holding and other things, because one that we're currently designing, which should be done by the time this video comes out, is of Desmond Doss. And he literally is holding in his hands the double bowline knot, like the rope that clearly it's not what he used that day to save all those guys off Hacksaw Ridge and lower them down, but it is representative of his actions. He was he was a Seventh-day Adventist, refused to carry a weapon, a conscientious objector. So there are other things that represent what he did. And there's so many times, students tend to think that you have to, injure someone, kill someone, be in that action to have received the Medal of Honor, and it's just not the case.
Right.
I mean, many of them weren't killing someone their action was not killing someone that they received that medal for. Mary Walker was a surgeon, served in the Civil War. You have that finger puppet coming to you. Andrews Raiders, many of them that raised flags, different things that they did through different wars that would be representative of their story, tying in that history stuff. So, tying in their story. It's a historical story, right?
Right.
So for some of the other puppets that you've created, I know you've collaborated with some teachers here at the school, and maybe I'm really hoping that there is some collaboration with this project, this design challenge, to where maybe you have an e-lab, or maybe you don't have an e-lab, but you can still do that collaboration where it's the history part of it, the theater part of it, Who is that? What can you tell us just a little bit about some collaborations you've done in the past, maybe to give some teacher sponsors some ideas of, thinking about who they could potentially collaborate on something like this, so they don't feel like they're all alone in doing this entire design challenge with their students.
Sure. Well, again, like going back to that, the portrait piece, right? The art teacher in your building, they know about portraiture and like how to do a portrait reading. Theater teachers are also great because they really are concerned with the wardrobe and like what is it that makes this character a character. Your English teachers, that's all the characterization pieces of a character in a book or a story, right? Like who is it that the author is trying to convey, right? And then how do we tell their story, right? So sometimes you can look at this, obviously history, right? U.S. history, world history. But the stories that we tell on the part of the people who need their stories told, right? How do we convey that in an honorable way? And so those are just some. I mean, I'll work with anybody, right? So there's no limit to the folks that you might want to work with.
And you don't have to be an E-Lab specialist to do this, right?
Oh, no.
Any teacher can pick this up and just start creating with their students. Can you talk just a touch about materials and things? I mean, I know you said they can be, they don't have to be fully dimensional. They can be two-dimensional, all these things. But can you talk about some of the materials that you have used in the past with students? I mean, I know you mentioned the website that has some of the template stuff.
Yeah.
But even if they just want to go from just scratch, just full origination, what does that look like?
Sure. Well, I always recommend you start out with some sort of paper, right? Or paper or cardstock. Paper is really easy to, it's inexpensive, right? So you can cut it all up and and again, like for younger kids, that dexterity piece, that fine motor skill piece, like you're really building skills with them in order to help them create that puppet, right? So paper is a great place to start because you can begin to see how those pieces are going to come together. And then you might go into like felt, right? Felt is another easy, it's very paper-like, but it's thicker and then it's got more, it's just got more dimension to it and obviously different colors and things like that. Then you get into your fleeces, right? So then fleeces are more soft touch. You think about those, again, going back to your Sesame Street puppets and things like that. Then you start walking your way into other sorts of fabrics. And again, like probably my favorite place to get fabrics is like at the thrift store, right? Because you don't have to get a whole yard of something or go find a fabric store. There's just, or you may find something at the house, if you need like a little bit of hair or something, maybe an old stuffed animal or something like that could lend itself to a little plop
to
of
help
hair.
out. And
Right.
when you do these kinds of projects with your students, what's kind of a timetable? Obviously, we'll have check-in points for this and timetables here, but what does that timetable look like for you with your students as far as those different iterations and how you introduce it to them, that design process? What does that look like?
Right. Yeah. So I think the thing that I've been at this a while, and it's taken me a while to realize that when we say when we tell a student we have 4 or 5 days to get this project done, let's say, what that really means is we have about whatever your class period is.
Right.
So we have about 4 30-minute sessions to get this done, which is, I don't know,
2 hours.
2 hours,
Yeah.
not a whole long time.
Yeah.
So like keep that in mind. I would say first sketch it out if you can. Keep it simple. Don't make it doesn't have to be photorealistic, right? Get it down to just shapes, right? Even something you can do on a Post-it, right? And then translate that into like figuring out how those materials are going to work together to make the different pieces of the costume of that puppet to portray who it is. So like first 30 minutes might be figuring out what this person's going to look like. Next 30 minutes might be doing your iteration on how we might cut those pieces together to make a rapid prototype. And then you may spend the bulk of your time making it fancy,
Yeah.
right? And then
Bringing it to life.
bringing it to life. And it's completely possible that the first go, in fact, it's not just possible, it's likely that the first go may be like not exactly what you were looking for. It's okay to start over and build on the successes that you had in that first model or two, and then bring that forward. But also keep in mind that you do need to have a hard end date, I would say. And we talked about this earlier, that like projects just kind of have interesting endings, right? It's a good place to stop. It's a good place to take a break, and then can it tell a story? You did the task, right?
Yeah.
Can it be a little bit fancier than, or can you add this or that? Yeah, absolutely. That may take another session or two, right? So it's really as far as you want to take it, but also make sure you get to some sort of a stop point.
Yeah. What advice would you give these teachers who are doing this for the first time? I mean, clearly it's the first design challenge we've put out like this, but what advice would you give to teachers who really have never done this? Again, don't have an e-lab, don't have those things. When it comes to projects like this, we've all been in the classroom. It's extra work, right? Because you're helping these students think through it. You're wanting them to think through it, but it's a lot of guidance. It's a lot of holding back so you are not doing the work for them. And you want them to get to that point, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes it's hard to let students not get to that point. But what kind of advice would you give to teachers who would be doing a design challenge for the first time?
You might start off with some templates if you can, certainly you want to do it yourself first, right? So that you have some sort of example, an exemplar of what it is that you're hoping to go for, right? Oftentimes, students will try to make that thing exactly the way that you made it before, okay? Which is fine. Because the goal is really not necessarily the thing, but it's actually the process that they're going through in order to get to the thing. So these conversations that we're having about why did you make that choice about what this person is wearing, or the look on their face, or those are really the conversations that you want to get into with the students, because that's where the real learning is. Is there learning in the kinesthetic, the tactile, tangible sorts of things? Yeah, absolutely. Because again, we're building those skills on using scissors, or drawing a straight edge, or drawing a fine line, right? Those are all important, but really it's more about the process itself and the discussions that we have about why it is that we're doing the things that we're doing. But I would just say, as much as you can, keep it simple, and then kind of build upon that after that.
And we'll have it structured where there are checkpoints in this design challenge, but again, keeping your timetables as much as you can, just so that you've got something to work off of the next one. So you're not just so far behind at the end on this. I think it's really important. Anything I should ask you, Matthew, Craig? Because you are the whiz at this puppetry stuff, and I'm probably leaving a lot of stuff out here.
Well, I just would say don't be afraid to goof up. Because that's where the learning happens. And share, again, going back to making that example for your students, share with them
your pain points, right?
Yeah, your pain points, the opportunities that you took when you're like, oh man, that didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to. So then I did this, right? Or help them understand that it's okay to make a pivot, right, into something that's actually that may work a little bit better, or just to be okay with what it is. Just try not to overthink it as much as you can.
The respectful bit is what I just want to kind of reiterate. I mean, I want it to be fun, but obviously, again, these are medal honor recipients, they're space medal honor recipients. Many of them have lost their lives. I mean, they were awarded posthumously. You have space medal honor recipients, like those on the Challenger, who were awarded after their death. So there is a level of respect that we need to bring to these people. But we also want them to be, conveyed as full of life too through this puppet, through these puppets, so we can keep telling these stories and what that looks like for kids. Do it in a creative way where they're designing, but also having to learn a bit about who these individuals are so that they can create the puppets that represent them. So there's all that learning that goes into it. What are some collaborations that you think would be really, really cool with this? Obviously, it could be you and a history teacher, could be you and a theater teacher. I'm hoping there's some economics teachers that get into this. Maybe they're talking about I don't know if we're getting to full supply and demand here on this, but these are also careers. Students could be careers. Students could be teachers. That could be a career. Students could clearly be making puppets. We talked with the Unemployed Philosophers Guild, who we've designed our puppets with. So there's so many different careers involved with this. What are some of the collaborations that they could do?
I guess I kind of got back into doing puppets myself because I was sharing a door with the theater teacher, and we found that students would characterize this before they characterize this, right? They don't want to characterize themselves because it's like embarrassing or whatever, but they'll be happy to use a stuffed animal or a puppet to convey a story in an exciting way. And so at the time I was teaching students about computers, and so in this particular computer class is more in video production. So it's like, oh, well, this has got it all, really, because we can get these puppets on screen. So if you've got video production equipment, and again, like probably you do in your pocket, right, as your smartphone or whatever, tablets, there's no barrier to entry on that. So it's just very easy to tell stories like that, doing video production and stuff like that. So that's an easy one.
That reminds me. I remember you telling us this, and can you speak to it again? There are those students that don't want to get in front and give a presentation,
right?
But something clicks when their face is not at the forefront and a puppet's face is at the forefront.
Right.
What is that? I mean, I remember you saying something to us about this. What does that look like for students that you've had? And I'm hoping, teachers, you've got some of those students that they're creative. They just don't want to stand in front of people and speak, but they might be able to do it through this.
Right. Like, I mean, if you want to get fancy pants, right, you can get like a shower rod and some sort of curtain that they can get behind, and then that way the puppet can be above the curtain, and they can be below the curtain so that they're completely hidden, and then they can characterize this puppet up here. That's probably the easiest way to do that. Could be.
But as far as students, though, like the students that you've had in here, have you seen them kind of, like something click for them when they could use, I mean, maybe you're just creating the puppets and not actually doing the storytelling in here, but I just remember you talking about that, where there were like kids who it's good. It's a real school.
Perfect, yeah.
There were kids who literally, maybe it wasn't you that you saw it, but maybe some other teachers had talked to you about it, but there were kids who literally wouldn't speak in front of people or had a really hard time doing it, but were able to do it through the puppets. And that's just like another medium where they can still be presenting, but it's not just their face up there.
Sure. Well, and I think that it speaks to kind of what puppets can do is that puppets can say things that you and I can't say, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For better or for worse, really. But I'm having a hard time thinking of a particular. We've done a lot of lip syncs with puppets, which are pretty fun. That would be another interesting idea. Is like if you took an historical audio of someone giving a speech, especially like a Medal of Honor recipient.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of like Smedley Butler,
yeah.
Right? Would be a really interesting reenactment. Oh well, we did a reenactment of the Lincoln-Douglas debate, right? Where, we had some animatronic puppets that were depicting Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln, and students did some voiceovers of that. That was super interesting. But yeah, you never really know. But I will say that, and it always surprises you when they kind of come out of their shell and become this other person.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Fun, creative, and it's all still learning at the same time. So really hope people do, jump into this design challenge and they be a part of it. All right, so these students are clearly going to be working in teams, just like our previous design challenge. But with that comes a lot of different ideas. Again, there's a lot of that collaboration, communication, all of those pieces that are put together to make a team that is going to drive forward on their project, right? Is there any advice you could give some to those teachers, to those teachers who know they're going to be working with students, they've got great ideas, but maybe there are some potential arguments that could arise, there's a little bit of friction there that could come from this. Obviously, friction is good in many cases because it gets you to a better point. But can you give some advice to teachers on how they might be able to better steer their teams that could, fall into that category?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of times people will create like a group project contract. Like these are kind of the things we're going to hold our group to, right? Also, sometimes if you define what those roles are, Usually I don't like to have a group much bigger than 3, because usually that's about as big as it needs to be. Otherwise oftentimes you have that 4th or 5th, however many above 3 you've got, who they're not meaningfully engaged in the process. And so then they're kind of on the side and they're just not meaningfully engaged. So I would say, it kind of depends on how big your project is, because as you mentioned, it could be a graphic novel, it could be finger puppets, it could be a video of depicting a story. Yeah. So each one of those, that kind of broadens the number of ingredients that you have to have in order to make that pie, right? So that's another thing for teachers to kind of consider what they want the result to be, and then kind of build their groups out from that. But again, so group contracts, clear rules about who's doing what. You might decide there's going to be a couple different designers in there. Maybe we're going to take these 2 designs and we're going to either choose one or the other, or we may combine the best parts and make a third, right? And then so that people are collaborating together. There's also this idea of I think it's called like a gateless method or a +1, right? Where we're not saying, well, I don't like this about this particular product. Instead, we kind of say, well, I really like these aspects of this, the way that you portrayed this this human here in this puppet visage, right? I like this, I like this, and then build upon those things that we like, so that we're not taking the feedback quite so personally that it's a negative thing. Yeah. That's not typical. We don't typically find that a lot in our culture, I don't think. Yeah. But I think it's something to work for.
Oh, perfect. Great advice. Can you look at that camera right over there and tell those teachers that they can do this, even though they might not have an e-lab or something fancy, that they can do this?
You can absolutely do this without a doubt. I know that you've probably already done something like this before. You don't have to have an e-lab. If you have one, awesome. If you don't, you can do it as low fidelity as you want, right? You can do it with scissors, and then just paper craft. I know that you've done this before. So just take heart in knowing that you've done this before, and it's going to be awesome no matter what it is that you come up with.
Because it's all about the learning process with the kids, right? We want to expose them to these stories. It's America 250. These individuals, our Medal of Honor recipients, are just ordinary people who've done extraordinary things, and we want to expose them to that history. They're people to look up to when we talk about courage and commitment, and it's going to take a lot of commitment to follow through with this project. Might take a lot of courage to say, we got to change direction on this. There's so many different elements in these values that are associated with the Medal of Honor that we can just put into this design challenge as well, while also learning about them and their stories. So we're just excited to offer this. We're very thankful for our funders who are excited about this too. And for you, talking to teachers who need to hear this.
It's a brave thing to do.
Yeah.
So give yourself credit where credit is due.
Luke, anything else?
I got one.
He's got creative stuff. Luke's creative too.
So you were talking about engagement, in the collaborative process. In the days of short attention spans, what encouragements or advice do you have to people just to keep your kids on track to keep them engaged, to keep them interested in what's going on.
That's great.
Can you speak to that at all? And I'll have you rephrase that question.
Sure.
Oh, you want me to do it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I won't say it as fresh as Luke did there.
That's fine.
But we clearly live in a world where we can home in on something for the span of 7.2 seconds, specifically students, and then they're off to the next thing. What advice would you give to teachers who may be working with students like this to keep them engaged in this project? You know, we're allowing this to be a school year-long project where they're signing up, getting their ideas together. There will be checkpoints, but what advice would you give to the teacher on their end, their teacher sponsor on their end, to ensure that students are staying engaged with this and not just quitting on it, right? You know, longer projects, it takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of commitment to it, like we've talked about. You know, little projects like this, those little check marks, when you're able to do it, it sets kids up. If you can do one, you can do the next and the next and the next. It's that one step forward. When we talk about Medal of Honor recipients, you know, they've got that courage to take that one step forward and one more and one more. And once you've taken the first one, the second one's a little bit easier and the next one's a little bit easier. And that's why we love offering these design challenges so that students can be engaged in something like this. But what advice would you give to teachers who, again, are working with those student teams that they're fired up the first 5 days and then you see a little bit start to wane?
Sure. Yeah, I think you have to build momentum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and those small steps are the way to do that. And I also think that the hands-on component of this is really one of the things that we've gotten away from a lot in education, where a lot of things are more digital, like, you know, on the computer. This is like, these are actual materials that are in your hand. So I think that helps a lot, right? But to your point, like on day 5, day 6, you know, so what is it that I'm expecting a student to do on that particular day? And, you know, as much as we don't really want to talk about grades, like a lot of times maybe that small component needs to be a graded assignment, right? Because it does give them a little bit of skin in the game, right? And it keeps them on track. So then if they understand how these small steps are going toward the goal, hopefully, again, like you've already built your example, your exemplar, so they know where it is that they're going. Now we're just going to back that up and show them the steps that you did in order to get there.
Yeah.
Right? It's really the same for students.
This is clearly experiential learning. Students are, you know, they're working with their hands. We've already going to mention this. How does this translate into the workforce? What does that look like? Clearly, not every student's going to grow up to be a puppet creator, right? But what are the skills they're gaining from this that can transfer into the workforce?
Well, you know, we haven't mentioned safety at the beginning of this, but like that is absolutely an important transferable skill no matter where you go, is using tools and materials safely and appropriately, right? So making sure you go over some just basic sharps, sorts of stuff. Like everyone should know how to use scissors. You know, just like watch out for one another and like use tools appropriately, right? As they're intended. The other part of that is also sometimes it doesn't work, right? So we kind of have to like step back and take a look at, you know, well, first of all, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? How am I going to approach that? When I'm not getting the result that I want, what changes can I make? Like what is within my ability to change about where I am right now, or the materials that I'm using, or the way that I'm approaching using the materials that will get me closer to a solution to what it is that I'm working with. I mean, those are absolutely employable skills, right? The other part of that also is like, yeah, what materials do I have at hand? What materials can I get?
Which ties in the economics, your resources,
Right.
your budgets, what do you have to work with? And you have that, you know, constrained budget that you have to work within to be able to make this project succeed. And if it's not, then maybe you have to go to a sponsor and talk to them and pitch your idea. So there's still some of that, I don't want to say salesy-ness about it,
Right.
but there's still some, you know, you're having to think through this process and how are you going to communicate it to other people and why this is important to complete, right?
Yeah.
And that's a skill you got to have all the time.
Right? Yeah, and we start with our parents, right? We've
Yeah.
got to sell them on getting that dog or that cat.
Yeah.
Or in this case, like getting some better materials for an awesome puppet, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's all salesmanship. It's telling a story
Yeah.
to convey what it is, what your vision is and where it is you want to go.
Yeah. And not in a creepy, weird salesman-y
No.
type way. It's like, here's the story that I really want to tell. And, you know, if you're a good storyteller and you're passionate about it and you're authentic about it and you really do mean it, like it comes across. And it's so very important. And so when students are eventually, you know, bringing voice to some of these puppets, like it's going to come across. Who are these people? And,
Right.
you know, you've put a lot of love into making this puppet. You've made it. Here it is. Now you're, you know, sharing it with the world.
Right. So, and then like whenever you pivot, like, you know, like let's say you're not a very good, you're not great at sewing things, right? A lot of people want to sew a puppet. They want to put, which is like, it's a complicated skill to sew a puppet up, right? Maybe you, you know, again, that's a needle is sharp, right?
Yeah.
So think about that. Maybe sewing things isn't quite in your wheelhouse yet, right? And hot glue, maybe an easy reach. And yet, hot glue is hot, right? And it's not so much the hot glue gun that's hot that usually burns me. Like, and I'm speaking from experience here. It's the hot glue itself, because I forget that it's still hot even after it comes out of the nozzle. So it's like, again, using materials appropriately and using them safely, and being aware of their limitations and the things that I need to be cautious about.
Yeah. Lots of skills
Yeah.
to transfer into regular everyday life.
And
Matthew, Craig, thank you for chipping into this, giving your words of wisdom
Oh.
to these teachers who may or may not have ever done a design challenge. It's just good to hear from teachers who've actually done it.
Sure.
You know, you can sit up there and talk all day about something, but teachers know when if you've been in the trenches with them, and you clearly are here doing it with students. So thanks for giving us a little bit of your time today.
No problem. Just don't forget that success may look different
Yeah.
than you initially imagined.